In a world where carbs are your enemy, you need one man to help you fight your battles. That man is Jimmy.
Combating nutrition disinformation and general bull. It's Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com.
News, low-carb, ketogenic, real food fans. A Real Good Foods company is now in all U.S. Walmart stores. They have enchiladas, poppers, cauliflower crust pizzas, mini pizza bites, and the chicken crust pizzas in 3,500 Walmart stores. Real Good Foods pizzas are grain-free, gluten-free, and of course, low-carb, high-fat, ketogenic. This is real food, and now it's available at your local Walmart. Get exclusive offers from Real Good Foods by texting RGF to 474747, and be sure to visit realgoodfoods.com to learn more about Real Good Foods' ketogenic line of products. Real Good Foods.
What's up, you guys? Welcome back to another Instagram Live, and we're here with another episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website, and if you want to engage live in the content, you got to go follow me over on Instagram. I'm at Living Low Carb Man right here, LivinLowCarbman. Once you're there, you can engage live in the content. We also go live over here on Facebook Live, so thank you guys for being a part of the Jimmy Rants family. If you missed the live on Instagram, you can watch it for up to 24 hours on replay. After 24 hours, it does disappear, so make sure you go over to YouTube to find all the past episodes. What are we at now? 300 and almost 320 episodes, I believe, is what we're up to. Pretty darn close. So go check it out. Type in a keyword Jimmy Rants as a keyword search on either Google or on YouTube. You will find the show. Finally, the best of the best moments of this here show are in podcast form. It's the Jimmy Rants podcast on Apple Podcasts as well as Stitcher. All of these links, you guys, are at JimmyRants.com. Today's Jimmy Rants is a continuation of a theme that I talk about here quite often on my show. Because whether you've noticed it or not, there is a concerted effort to try to discredit the keto message. So many of us have eaten a low-carb, high-fat ketogenic diet because it's given us great markers in our health. It's helped us lose some weight. It's just generally made us healthier from the inside out. And yet, with some of the studies, and I put that in quotation marks, that have come out in 2019, and some of the news stories and some of the kind of narrative that is out there in the health media, you can tell they are responding directly to the popularity of the keto diet. And I have a new study that has just come out today, and it's already scaring the bejeebies out of a lot of people. So I thought, okay, it just came out this morning. It just got released. It's all over the news media. Let's go ahead and do a Jimmy Rants to respond. Because when you eat keto, have you noticed this? When you go keto and you've gotten well keto adapted, you spontaneously do something really interesting in the way you eat. The way you ate as a sugar burner was probably like eat breakfast in the morning, 7 a.m., then you'd have to have a mid-morning snack somewhere around 9:30 or 10 a.m. Then you'd go to lunch at 12 or 1. And then you'd have the mid-afternoon snack because you'd be crashing from the lunch you just ate. And then you'd have dinner after that snack. You'd have dinner around 5 or 6 o'clock. And then while you're watching TV, you're probably having another snack after dinner. And maybe even one more feeding time of kind of eating a midnight snack. And so when you are a sugar burner, you've got all these little feeding windows, and we've talked about this before. When you have so many feeding windows, you have to when you're a sugar burner, because you're not able to store a whole lot of sugar in your body before having to refuel. So what happens when you shift over from sugar burner to fat burner and burning ketones? You're very satisfied in your diet, to the point that you wake up in the morning and you're not hungry. And people can't wrap their heads around, how in the world are you not hungry? It's breakfast time. And of course, in my book, The Complete Guide to Fasting, which I co-authored with Dr. Jason Fung, we talked about that word breakfast. All it means, you guys, is break the fast. So who says your break fast has to be at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning? Why can't it be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? And yet, today, we have a brand new study, which we're going to talk about here today, that talks about skipping breakfast being tied to a higher risk of heart-related death. Yeah, they went there. And when I read this headline, I went, oh my freaking goodness, what the heck are they talking about? So what I want to talk about here today is skipping breakfast is extremely healthy and natural when you eat keto. Hear me loud and hear me proud to all these researchers that got this cockamamie study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. Hear me loud, hear me proud. I do not need oatmeal and orange juice and skim milk and whatever other crappy garbage breakfast item you think I should be eating in my diet in the morning in order to be healthy. My heart-related health is doing just fine thanks to my ketogenic lifestyle. And I'm going to get into the details here in a second, but think about what impacts your heart health. It's inflammation. Inflammation goes down on keto. It's insulin. Insulin goes down on keto. It's blood sugar related. Blood sugar goes down on keto. It's triglycerides, the truly bad fat that's in your body. It goes down like a rock on keto. All of these key health markers in your heart get better when you intermittent fast, which is AKA skip breakfast, and when you eat keto. Guys, this is nothing more than just a response to the masses of people that are eating a low-carb, high-fat, ketogenic diet with periods of intermittent fasting. That's all this is. But let's get into the details so I can rip them a new one. So I have two stories here, CNN and USA Today. It's really interesting on the USA Today one, that's what they consider is kind of a typical breakfast, which is probably true of most Americans going to like a fast food restaurant. I guess that's like a sausage egg McMuffin or something. So anyway, let's get to the CNN article first. Whether you eat breakfast might be linked with your risk of dying early from cardiovascular disease, according to a new study published in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology. Skipping breakfast was significantly associated, keyword there, with an increased risk of cardiovascular related death, especially dying from stroke. So they looked at and accounted for a person's age, sex, race, socioeconomic status, diet, lifestyle, BMI, and disease status. How do they take all that into account? How do you isolate out all of those confounding variables in this study? All right, let's keep going. The study found that those who never ate breakfast had an 87% higher risk of cardiovascular mortality. In other words, you're going to die from heart stuff, compared with people who ate breakfast every single day, according to the senior author on the study. His name, Dr. Y. Bo, or Y. Bao. It's W-E-I first name, last name B-A-O. He's an assistant professor of epidemiology at the University of Iowa. He says breakfast is traditionally believed as the most, or at least one of the most important meals of the day. Why? Who says that breakfast is the most important meal of the day? When did that become a part of our lexicon that people just inherently believe without questioning why breakfast is deemed the most important meal of the day? We've all heard it our whole lives. We always believe that, quote, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Of course, I've always used it and turned it on them. Okay, I agree. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I just don't think you have to have it at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. you can have your breakfast, that's all the origin of breakfast means is when you break your fast, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. No big deal. No big deal. But there are not much data available to say yes or no to whether this belief is true. Our paper is among the ones that provide evidence to support long-term benefits. No, it doesn't. You're going to find out here in a minute. This is more of that same kind of really bad science that we have seen in the literature lately. And quite frankly, you guys, I'm getting I'm over it. I'm over them trying to put off bad science as being legitimate and trying to scare the bejeebies out of people out of not eating breakfast. And if you're just joining us, yes, there is yet another new story trying to scare you as a keto dieter who is choosing to intermittent fast in the morning because, oh yeah, by the way, that's another thing people are interested in right now, not just keto, but also incorporating fasting into their routine. And a lot of people like to skip breakfast as part of that intermittent fasting. So they'll eat their last meal the night before at say 6 o'clock. They'll wake up the next morning, not have the traditional breakfast time, and then they'll eat at like noon, and that's a nice 18-hour window of intermittent fasting, which gives them great benefits. But this new study that came out that we're talking about here today is trying to make the argument that if you skip breakfast and you regularly do that, you're going to die of heart-related issues. It's just nonsense. The way they put this stuff out there like it's true, it's blasted all over the health media, and then people are, oh my gosh, I guess I need to have a waffle for breakfast. It's maddening. There are a few cardiovascular risk factors, for example, diabetes, hypertension, and lipid disorders. Our findings are in line and supported by previous studies that consistently showed that skipping breakfast is related to those strong risk factors for cardiovascular death. Somebody please tell me how skipping breakfast gives you diabetes. How does skipping breakfast give you high blood pressure, hypertension? How, pray tell, does skipping breakfast lead to lipid disorders? A lot of that research that they're citing is more bad science, by the way, but I know what they're talking about. And there was some studies that said that those who ate breakfast ended up eating less calories later in the day, whereas if they skipped breakfast, they ended up loading up on calories on the back end of their day, and that led to obesity and disease. That's kind of the theory that they have out there as to why you don't want to skip breakfast. But to me, you guys, when you go keto, when you start using periods of intermittent fasting, regardless of your nutritional approach, the point of skipping breakfast isn't just to skip it for skipping's sake. You're skipping breakfast with a very specific goal in mind. And it's give your pancreas a break. How many people are constantly making their pancreas have to work harder and harder and harder because they keep eating and keep eating and keep eating, and they never really give their body a chance to relax, their pancreas a chance to take a breather. I think this is deliberately an attack on those of us that eat keto and naturally skip breakfast. I wake up a lot of times in the morning and I don't usually eat till maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And when that happens, I'm not worried about my cardiovascular health. I'm actually very happy that I'm getting extremely healthy markers because I'm allowing my body to have those periods of intermittent fasting. But let's get back to the study because here come the details, you guys. The study involved data. There it is again. You hear me harp on this often on Jimmy Rants. When they talk about the study looked at data and not people, that is your telltale sign that this is bad science. Because data doesn't really lead you to any conclusions about humans. All data does is it helps you form the hypothesis. I don't want to beat that dead horse because I've harped on that really strongly in previous Jimmy Rants, but suffice it to say, when they look at data, they're not actually looking at people, and this is a clear distinction that needs to be made. Listen at the years that they did this. The study involved data from 1988 to 1994. I wonder if there's anybody watching Jimmy Rants right now that was born after 1994. Let's see, 95, you'd be like 20, 21, 20, actually 25 years old. So if you're 25 or less, this data didn't even apply to you. So what are they doing looking at data from I was still in high school in 1988. And that was a long time ago. On 6,550 U.S. adults that were ages 40 to 75. So 98, 2008, so that was 31 years ago. So they would be 71 to 106 today if they're still alive. So they reported on how often they ate breakfast in the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. So they reported how often they ate breakfast. When they go to these people with these surveys and they say, so how often do you eat breakfast over the last, 3 years? Would you know how many times you ate breakfast over the last 3 years? I have no idea. I would tell them most days I did not eat breakfast. Oh, never ate breakfast is what they would write down, the researchers. The survey data generally let responders define what meal would be considered breakfast. So here's an interesting wrinkle in their data that they're not accounting for in their reaction to it and their results. They're letting the person who responds to define what breakfast means. So if they came to me and said, how many times did you skip breakfast? I'd be like, I never skip breakfast. I always have it at 12 or 1 because that's when I have my break fast. Interesting, huh? Separate data was analyzed to determine the adult's health status through 2011. All told, there were 2,318 deaths that occurred during an average follow-up period of 18.8 years. Guess what? They were upwards of 106 to 107 years old. They die when they get that old. Oy vey. 619 of them got cardiovascular disease. The researchers took a closer look at how often each person consumed breakfast and when they died, specifically whether a death was related to cardiovascular health. And in the data, breakfast was defined by, again, however they want breakfast to be defined, the people that were responding. The problem with this, guys, is they pretend like cardiovascular disease only happens when you skip breakfast. Could there not be any other factors involved? Could they be eating bad oils that would raise inflammation in their bodies, like vegetable oils, the seed oils? Could it be that they had refined carbohydrates like white flour and white sugar and starchy foods that could have led them, if they didn't eat breakfast, led them to eat those kinds of things later in the day, and that could lead to cardiovascular disease? There's so many things that could have been involved. And yet they want to come down on skipping breakfast was the culprit in why they died of some kind of a cardiovascular event. Come on, does this make any sense at all? This doesn't even make common sense. And I am not a medically trained researcher or practitioner in any way. Why is some schlub like Jimmy Moore able to figure out that this is complete nonsense? And yet this gets by peer-reviewed journal review boards, and they think this is good science. This ain't good science. This is the worst of the worst kind of science that you can possibly get published. And yet, guys, it gets out there. This lady that wrote me this morning, she took a screenshot with her phone that said, look what they're talking about on CBS this morning. And it was all about this news. And then people partake in that news and they oh my gosh, I eat breakfast. I don't eat breakfast all the time. I guess I should start having my cereal and my skim milk and my orange juice again and have a banana. I guess I need to do that so I don't have problems with my heart health. You see how they're shaping the narrative and how they're shaping those of us that eat keto and engage in intermittent fasting. They're dictating to you that they know better about what you should be doing, and if they try to scare you with so-called science, they're going to do it. They pull the science card all the time, and I'm going to call them out because this is bad science to the hilt. 5.1% reported never eating breakfast. These are the people that had a cardiovascular health issues. 10.9% rarely ate breakfast. 25% had breakfast on some days, and then 59% had breakfast every day. Okay, hold on a second. They're trying to make the claim that if you skip breakfast, that's what led to a cardiovascular health death. Did you catch that last statistic? 59% ate breakfast every single day. So if skipping breakfast was the reason why they had a cardiovascular event, a stroke, a heart attack, whatever, and they ended up dying as a result of that cardiovascular event, why did those 59% that ate breakfast every day? I thought breakfast was the answer. I thought that if you had your breakfast, that's what they're trying to say with this headline, skipping breakfast tied to higher risk of heart-related death. But what I would see here is the grand majority of the people that had cardiovascular issues ate breakfast. That 59% ate breakfast, and yet they still had a cardiovascular event. And let's not forget, they're being promoted to not just eat breakfast, but when you do eat breakfast, eat healthy oatmeal, healthy whole grain cereal, have a banana, have this, have skim milk, have that. Stay away from that saturated fat. Stay away from the bacon and the eggs and the avocado. You don't need all that nonsense in your diet. You need to have crappy garbage in your diet because we know best. To me, this study is literally all over the board. Number one, it's a bad science because it's looking at data, not people. But if you're going to actually look at the data shows people who had breakfast every single day, 60% of them ended up with some kind of heart death. Why is that not the headline? Why are they trying to scare people away from eating breakfast? The people that basically skip breakfast every day, those people, that's 5.1%. 5.1%, as compared with 59% who ate breakfast every day. So the data that they're sharing from their study doesn't even match what the conclusion is. That makes sense to anybody? Doesn't to me. Compared with those who consume breakfast every day, adults who never did so had a higher risk of heart disease-related death and stroke-related death. No, that's not what you found. What you found was 59% had breakfast every day and they ended up with cardiovascular death. That's what you found. I wish they would just be honest about their data. Now, they had a narrative, you guys. They went into this with the conclusion already written. They wanted to have the headline that they got. And again, its sole purpose is to discourage you stupid people who end up eating keto, you dumb people that don't know any better, that you don't want to skip breakfast and engage in intermittent fasting. They're trying to shape you into changing what you do. Is it going to impact you? Or you? It's not going to impact me. This kind of bad science does not deserve to get a platform. And yet you're going to see it all over the news today. Those associations were found to be significant and independent of their socioeconomic status, talking about whether they can afford to buy food, blah, blah, blah. Body mass index and cardiovascular risk. To the best of our knowledge, this is the first prospective analysis of skipping breakfast and the risk of cardiovascular mortality. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. That's not what you studied. That's not what you looked at. You can play the Wizard of Oz and say, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, but we're looking at the man behind the curtain today. And the man behind the curtain has his pants down because we caught you in a big fat whopper. The study did have some limitations. Oh, you think? Including that the data did not include information about what food and drink were consumed for breakfast. Yeah, no kidding, because that matters when it comes to cardiovascular health. If they had bacon and eggs and avocado with some cheese, maybe some sour cream, that is a far different and far healthier breakfast than one that is full of oatmeal and cereal and any other crappy carbs you can think of that they have for breakfast. A bagel with fat-free cream cheese, skim milk, and orange juice. Those two things are not the same. The latter meal is extremely unhealthy. The former meal is extraordinarily healthy, even though they want to flip the script on that. And whether a person's breakfast consumption patterns changed between 1994 and when the follow-up mortality data was collected. So that was the other limitation they said in the study. When they tested them first in 1994 or last in 1994, they never did follow-up until they died. So they don't know what might have changed in their diet. There's a whole lot more limitations about that study, which I've already articulated, but this is the kind of thing, you guys. You can make epidemiological studies looking at data say anything you want. And that's what they did. They wanted a conclusion, and they're like, oh, let's pull these old studies from 30 years ago out. Let's pull them out now, you guys. And now let's make that conclusion we want to make, and we'll make a big splash in the scientific community, which is exactly what they've done here today. Most importantly, they said, the study found only an association between skipping breakfast and the risk of early death. Association does not mean causality. And yet, if you read the headline says, skipping breakfast tied to higher risk of heart-related death, according to a new study. What are people going to hear when they read that headline? Skipping breakfast tied to higher risk of heart-related death. Well, dang, I'm never going to skip breakfast again if that's true. That's what people are going to say and how they're going to respond to this. They won't get to the part on page 3 of this story where it says it's only an association, not that skipping breakfast specifically causes any such outcome. It's crazy. More research is needed to determine whether missing the meal actually shortens life expectancy and why this association exists. Well, no, we don't need, quote, more research that's like this. This is epidemiological research. So now, if they want to make the hypothesis of skipping breakfast leading to more cardiovascular deaths, now you need to test that. You need to get people in a randomized controlled study. The problem is, this kind of study doesn't manifest itself in 6 months, a year, or 2 years, which is what an RCT, a randomized controlled trial, would be. This is 20, 30 years to do follow-up on people, but you can't control the circumstances. Once they leave a metabolic ward, you can't control for all the variables that would be at play. And see, this is why these epidemiological researchers like this one here today, that's why they can get away with doing this research. Well, we could never actually study this in a metabolic ward. We can't lock people away for 20, 30 years of their life just to look at this. And so that's why they get away with this kind of research. In general, the study noted that skipping breakfast has been associated with an increased risk of obesity. How do you get fatter for skipping breakfast? To me, I understand the argument of if you don't eat breakfast, maybe you load up on food later in the day, and that maybe having your meals earlier in the day would keep weight in check. But you can't say that just because someone skips the breakfast time, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, just because they skip that breakfast doesn't mean they're automatically going to pack on pounds. If you're a keto dieter, you naturally give up breakfast pretty often, and yet you don't have higher weight. High blood pressure, again, tell me how high blood pressure happens when you skip breakfast. I don't get that one. Type 2 diabetes, we talked about metabolic syndrome and heart disease. Guys, what's the connection? Metabolic syndrome and heart disease by skipping breakfast? What is so magical about putting food in your mouth at 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning? What is that doing for you? What is that doing for you that you can't get the same positive impact in your health later in the day? Why is it good to eat food at lunchtime and dinner time, but it's not good if you skip breakfast in the morning? That's better than eating lunchtime or dinner time? I'm not getting the connection to all these diseases. associate professor of nutrition at the University of Illinois, Chicago, who was not involved in the research, her name Krista Varady, she said this new study was, quote, fairly well done. No, it was not. This is one of the worst kind of studies that you can do. But guys, they're making the splash today. Pay attention today. You're going to see this study all over the network news. You're going to see it on, and show up in newspaper articles and magazines over the next few weeks and months. This is why the bad science pervades, because it gets out there, it makes this big splash, and then it's echoed. And you'll see this study. Oh, well, we know from recent research that if you skip breakfast, that's actually far worse for your heart health and you might die, blah, 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 blah. And this is how it continues to get out there. And people casually sitting in a doctor's office or waiting to get their hair cut, and they're reading this magazine, and in the magazine, they see this reference to this study that I'm responding to here today. It's making the big splash today, but the real reverberations is when it will end up showing up in magazine articles and other things down the road. That's why this stuff has to be responded to. It's nonsense. The major issue is that the subjects who regularly skip breakfast also had the most unhealthy lifestyle habits, says this associate professor. Specifically, these people were former smokers, heavy drinkers, physically inactive, and also had poor diet quality and low family income. Do you think any of those things had a role in why those people died of cardiovascular events? What does a smoker have that could make them die of heart disease? Smoking! What does a drinker have that could make them die of heart disease? Drinking! Physically inactive? So you never give your heart the strength that it needs to continue on. And then poor diet quality, we've talked about that. You eat all the crappy garbage in the world, you're going to have a cardiovascular event, whether you eat breakfast or don't eat breakfast. And then low family income, not being able to afford to buy good quality food. It's no mystery as to why these people died of some kind of a heart-related incident. None whatsoever. All of those factors put people at a much higher risk for cardiovascular disease. No kidding. Thank you, Captain Obvious. I realize that the study attempted to control for all of these confounders, but I think it's hard to tease apart breakfast skipping from their unhealthy lifestyle in general. My point here today, exactly. But the problem is the headline says skipping breakfast does all these things. And you got to get to page 4 now of this story before you get to, oh, oops, maybe it's not just skipping breakfast that does all this. Some people might skip breakfast as part of an intermittent fasting routine. Yes, you bet your sweet bippy we do. But the breakfast skipping in the study and breakfast skipping during intermittent fasting are two totally different concepts. How do they parse that out? How do you differentiate between someone who is engaging in intermittent fasting and someone who just skips breakfast? What would be their purpose? They're not hungry. So if they're not hungry and they're skipping breakfast, that's why they're skipping breakfast. How do you keep up with that? How would they know? How would your body know? Okay, this guy, he's fasting. So we don't want to mess with his ticker. If he's fasting, he's doing it for a good reason. This person just skipped breakfast because they didn't have time. They were rushing out the door and didn't have time to eat. Blah, 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 blah. Does that make any sense at all? Some studies, several involving animals, suggest that intermittent fasting can reduce the risk of obesity and related diseases like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, diabetes, and cancer. No, they're making the claim in this study that skipping breakfast, regardless of the reason, skipping breakfast leads to all those same diseases. They can't have it both ways. Either it leads to all those diseases or it doesn't lead to all those diseases. Let's not pretend like we're talking out of both sides of our mouth here. There are very good ways to do intermittent fasting, potentially very bad ways to do intermittent fasting, but certainly that's an interesting thing to keep in mind that A, maybe it's better to stick with 12 or 13 hours of fasting and that's it, or B, if you need to do 16 hours, try to consider skipping dinner and not breakfast or lunch. So we had a study a couple months ago I did here on Jimmy Rants where we said that eating earlier in the day does have a more positive effect on your total health if you eat earlier in the day. And I talked about how I try to get in all my meals, which I eat one meal a day, typically OMAD, and I try to get that meal in by no later than say 3 o'clock. And so if you eat one meal, then kind of eat around midday and you're good. If you end up eating two meals, maybe, according to that other study that I did a previous Jimmy Rants on, you eat kind of like 9 a.m. and then maybe a second meal at 3 p.m. and then you intermittent fast until the next day. That could be a way to do this that could be beneficial. So I agree that there is possibly a better way to intermittent fast. But guys, the bottom line in this Jimmy Rants is they're trying to make the case that skipping breakfast is going to cause harm. And I'm not seeing any connection. I'm not even seeing the association because 59% of the people in the study data that they looked at, 59% of them ate breakfast every single day, and yet they still died. 59% of those 900 and something, they still died of a cardiovascular event. So how did they come to the conclusion that it's skipping breakfast, which was only 5% of those people who died? They had 500 people in the survey, in the study. What about all those other people that didn't die of cardiovascular disease? What was the data of skipping breakfast there or eating breakfast there? I would love to have seen that. That was not in any of these news stories. All right, let me look at the USA Today story and see if there's anything else of interest in this story. I think we got most everything. Yeah, so everything was in that CNN story. So we'll throw that one out the water. Oop. I threw it and it hit the fan and came right back at me. So the bottom line of this Jimmy Rant, skipping breakfast is extremely healthy and natural when you eat a ketogenic diet. And intermittent fasting becomes very normal, very natural. You don't think about it. You're not worried about your heart health. You're not going to die because you, quote, skip breakfast. It's nonsense. But this, guys, this is what gets out in the culture. And if it gets out there, we got to respond to it here on Jimmy Rants. All right, let's see what you guys have to say on Instagram first. We'll be over to you here in a minute, Facebook. So welcome in, welcome in. Thanks for being here today for this episode. Justin says 16-8 fasting window for the win. Yes, there's a lot of people that get great benefits from doing 16-8. I like the OMAD, but if I do two meals, I kind of like 18-6. So you get a nice 6-hour feeding window from like 12 to 6 p.m., maybe 11 to 5 p.m., and you eat at 11, you eat at 4:30, and you're done. That's it. Mary says, we drop supper 4 weeks into keto. It happens naturally, doesn't it, Mary? And when you start feeling more satiated. And here's a key too, when you're keto, when you have less numbers of meals, you do eat a little bit more, but you want to get enough calories and energy in the meals that you do eat. Magnolia says, I just saw this on the news. Seriously, I weighed more when I ate the traditional timed breakfast and ate more throughout the day, was constantly hungry, and cravings were off the charts. Yeah, you're articulating a lot of what a lot of us have had to deal with. Balance, Nourish, Heal, you're not kidding with all those meals. That was me, and now I eat twice a day. Yeah, I think 1 to 2 meals for most people that are keto is pretty typical. Brittany says, or skipping dinner. Yeah, exactly. Mary says, they will do or say anything to keep us buying their BS programs and products. And Mary, I think this is a key here. This is why you hear me articulate this so early and so often on Jimmy Rants. We got to know what's happening, guys. We got to know what's going on in the culture, that there is this concerted effort to try to make us all plant-based. There is this concerted effort to discourage you in your ketogenic lifestyle and from making the healthier choices that you're making. Guys, they're feeling the pinch. Food companies, pharmaceutical companies, there are so many interests involved in all of this that you got to know, even the researchers aren't immune to this. They're going to put out biased research. And when they do, I call them out here on Jimmy Rants. Mary says that study must have been from Kellogg's or some cereal company. That's the thing. I don't know who funded this research, but I would not be surprised. And we found out that there's little tactics like when I did the response to the whole keto crotch story that got out there, we learned after it got out there all over the news, we learned that it was a public relations firm that was behind Weight Watchers and the Eat Lancet study and some of the other entities that are feeling the pinch from keto being so popular. And they put out this fake story that said women will have issues in their crotch. They called it the keto crotch. And it was like literally all over the place. And I still see articles coming out with the keto crotch. So it's crazy how once something gets out there into the zeitgeist, so to speak, it just takes on a life of its own. And so that's why I'm responding to this study today, you guys, because when you get these kind of headlines, it'll take on a life of its own. It's getting out there. It's on network television today. All the news media is going to have it out there. Oh my gosh. So we have to be ready to explain to people that we love in our life why this is bad science. Anita says, we all eat breakfast every day, LOL, some just not until 3 o'clock, exactly. University of Iowa, says Bullock in 2018, the corn state could taint the study. Yeah, I wonder if the corn lobby might have been a part of this. Charming Confessions, I hate breakfast food, always have. So having my breakfast at lunchtime has been so awesome for me. Yes. They're panicking because keto is taking over. Oh, it's long taken over. And now they're scrambling to try to discourage people who have embraced this. Here's the thing. If you have seen great results on your ketogenic lifestyle in your weight and in your health markers and in the way you feel and in your ability to go many hours without eating and in your brain health and all these positive effects, don't you dare let a cockamamie study come out to discourage you from what you know is working for you. Because at the end of the day, the only study that matters to you is the one you're doing on yourself. So if you're doing some modality like keto and you're not having breakfast in the morning and you're incorporating periods of intermittent fasting and you're getting benefit from that, there's no reason to panic when some study like this comes out. All even a good quality study, a randomized controlled clinical trial study is doing is showing, hey, look, this is what happened in these people. Just FYI. That's literally all that even that means. In a study like this one, they're not even looking at people, they're looking at data. So it really has no application to a human. So therefore you should not be upset by whatever the conclusion is. What a world, says Keto Bobs, exactly. I love it when you have a drama outburst, says Anita, makes my day. Yeah, these kind of studies bring out the drama in Jimmy Moore every time. Temple says, worst nutrition myth of all time. That right alongside you have to eat 6 meals a day. What a nightmare. Talk about a good way to have people's blood glucose get up every day. And maybe that's the intended purpose, Temple. She said, unbelievable. It is unbelievable. Mary says, if we had listened to that crap, my husband would be dead by now. But instead, he got healthy. Well, congratulations. That's so awesome. Bullock in 2018, let's hear from all those participants now. Yeah, all the rest of the participants that didn't die. Now, keep in mind, they're all much older now. They're all over 70 years old, well over 70, a lot of them upwards of 106, 107 years old if they're still alive. So I would be interested in the data of those who are still around and did not die from a cardiovascular event. There's no money in healthy people, says Magnolia. No, but it shouldn't be about that. We know it's about that, but it shouldn't be about that when it comes to health. Corella says, I skip breakfast every day and I feel sharper and less run down. That's awesome. This just came in on our local news in Canada, made me laugh so hard because I'm on with you ranting right now while watching it on television. See, this is called cutting edge, Anita. I try to keep you guys right on the cutting edge of what is happening. Jesse says, I was so proud of my bagel with cream cheese. I thought it was being healthy. Yeah, I think we all had bagels back in the day. The thing is, I never really liked bagels. They were a little bit too hard for me. Now, if it was a really soft bagel and I could get like really good cream cheese on there, yeah, maybe. But I think we all fooled ourselves into believing that was healthy. I want some science on those of us that eat one meal a day in the morning and fast the next morning. Yeah, that'd be great, Temple. Dr. Barry just did a YouTube video on this study too. Oh, thank you, Musing Poet. Yeah, Dr. Ken Barry definitely stays on top of the stuff like I do. Fake news continues, says Bullock in 2018. Yeah, if there's any clear-cut definition of what fake news in the health realm looks like, this is it. This is about as fake as it comes. Kitty Caddick says, I'm skipping not just meals, but days, sometimes like 10 in a row. Yeah, Kat's been doing all kind of extended fast. So she says, I'm getting better and better in all aspects. Pretty darn typical. All right, let's go over to Facebook Live. Thank you guys for being patient and welcome into Jimmy Rants. Let's see what you got to help me rant about. Hello, hello. Wow, lots of people from all over the world too. Denmark. I just woke up. I'm not hungry and I feel good, says Jessica. Yeah, that's pretty typical for a lot of us. And the thing is, the reason you feel good is you got ostensibly a good night's sleep because your nutrition isn't making your body have to work so hard. But then your ketones are keeping you satisfied. So kudos, that's awesome. I tell people I eat breakfast almost every day, says Val. Just happens to be at a different time of day. Exactly. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. You can pull this out. You can steal it from Jimmy Moore. If somebody says, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I agree with that. So I have mine about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. You will blow their minds if you do that. Mitzi said, I ate a ribeye dripping in olive oil, applewood smoked sea salt with a side of shredded Brussels sprouts cooked in bacon grease for my break fast today after fasting for 20 hours. Mitzi, I'm coming over. Have me one ready when I get there. So long as my triglycerides are good, says Nancy, I don't need to worry about my cholesterol being high. Why would you worry? High cholesterol is not a disease. Read my book, Cholesterol Clarity, What the HDL is Wrong with My Numbers, cholesterolclarity.com. Patrick said the methods are based on the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. That was 28 years ago. Exactly. Old data, Patrick. Exactly. Mima says, what about lifestyle? Like what time do people go to bed and wake up? See, you're bringing in things that are more confounding variables. They only talked about some of the limitations that they talked about, but there's so many, including the one you mentioned here. How was their sleep? How was their stress? Were they having a good life? We looked at and they accounted for some of the socioeconomic situation, but there's so many confounders here. And the biggest confounder is they didn't look at people, they looked at data. My suspicion is that those who skip breakfast in this study also didn't exercise when they woke up or have other healthy habits. Yeah, they said as much in at the end of the article. The problem is most people didn't get past the headline. I never ate breakfast even before keto, says Susie. Oh, you're so unhealthy, Susie. Bad science is right. If you skipped breakfast 28 years ago, you may be at higher risk for heart disease. That's what Patrick said. Who backed the study? Yeah, we don't know, unfortunately. When I do research papers for my master's degree, I can't use anything over 5 years old, says Tammy. I think older research is certainly okay to look at, but to hang your hat on and to make some kind of a conclusion, how much of the world has changed in the past 30 years? I mean, if you even think about like all these technologies like iPhones and iPads and all kind of devices that are out there now, none of this and EMF exposure, there's just so many things that have changed about the world that really that data is irrelevant in today's modern culture. Patrick says, I come from an academic background in nutrition. I can assure you that we treat the NHANES prospective study as the Holy Grail. Oh, I know researchers use that data from NHANES all the time. It's a massive database that forms the basis of so many nutrition studies. And the problem, Patrick, is it's used, but it's abused. I don't think some of that data is necessarily relevant to the conclusions that are made. And that's the problem. They're coming to conclusions using the NHANES data, but they're not using the conclusions of their epidemiological study looking at the NHANES data to form a hypothesis to then test in a randomized controlled clinical way. They always say more research is needed, but they never actually do that research that's needed. And the research that's needed is a randomized controlled clinical trial in a metabolic ward. Those things are extraordinarily expensive, and that's why they never do them. They got the medical community to have all of this research get published in journals, and so they make the big splash that they wanted. That's the intended purpose. Let's make the big splash, get more funding for our research, and all they're doing is looking at data and not actually people. To me, in a clinical setting, a clinical study type of setting, that is the best science that we have to offer. The sad part is most nutritional health science is not clinical studies. Mary says, true, it's impossible to skip breakfast since glucose tends to be higher in the morning. Eating in the morning is a little stupid, especially so for diabetics with unusually high glucose in the morning. The biggest mistake that a type 2 diabetic can make is to raise their glucose even higher before injectable insulin became the norm. Fasting was the treatment for diabetes. Making the pancreas rest usually healed it, and insulin resistance would become improved. Mary, spot on, my dear. That's awesome. Awesome stuff. Patrick said it's very faulty data because of inherent limitations on memory recall, plausibility, garbage in, garbage out. Yeah, exactly. Val says, I knew people who didn't eat in the morning but had coffee and cigarettes. Oh my gosh, coffee and cigarettes diet in the morning. Yikes. Wonder how many in the study did this. Yeesh. Yeah, they said at the end, they kind of hinted as much, that those who skipped breakfast ended up having really nasty habits elsewhere in their life, drinking, smoking. It's almost like they don't expect people to actually read the articles, just stop at the scary headlines. Bonnie, that's exactly, I guarantee you that there are people who are going to see this headline, skipping breakfast tied to higher risk of heart-related death study finds, or quickly see it on the nightly news, and that's all they're going to see. They're not going to dig deeper. They're not going to try to find that. Maybe they'll try to Google and they'll find this Jimmy Rants video on YouTube or something, but it's just amazing to me. People aren't willing to put in the effort to dig deeper than what they're being told. We're not sheeple, people. We have brains for a reason. We should be using them, and you guys do, because you sit here and watch these every single day. Sue says, bottom line, the news channels try to keep us sick. They're in with big pharma. We're learning what makes us feel well, and lab numbers are good. Low carb and keto rocks. Yes, yes it does. Let's see. Susan says, I don't think we can value peer review any longer. No, it really means nothing. Peer review over scientific articles that get published in a medical journal that they know is going to make a big headline. Those people that are on those peer review panels should be ashamed of themselves. We rely on peer review, which for those of you that don't know what that phrase means, basically it's other doctors and medical professionals and researchers that look at the study to make sure all the design and everything is good about it. And if all of them unanimously agree that it's a good study, then they agree to have it published in a journal. Well, it has to go through that process to get published in a reputable journal. And it passed peer review. This one passed peer review somehow, some way. The education in our country is very different than it was 20 years ago. Individuals do not need to truly master their field. These published articles are now reviewed by their peers who are as off base as they are. Very well stated. What if I'm not hungry, says Sue. Mornings I'm rarely hungry. Yeah, that's the question. How do they make the conclusion that skipping breakfast is going to cause harm? What if you're not hungry? Are you supposed to force food into your body if you're not hungry in the morning? That doesn't make sense. Sensationalism, association data makes the headline. Please don't let this dissuade you from overnight fasting. Exactly. Exactly, Mima. I wonder what they would say of those of us who do extended fasting. So not only do we skip breakfast, we skip breakfast, lunch, dinner, days on end. Are we going to die as soon as we end the fast? Crazy. Norway is shining with much sun. I've not been eating breakfast the last 4 to 6 years, feeling absolutely fantastic by skipping breakfast, says Tommy. Tommy, thank you for sharing and thanks for watching all the way in Norway. Not much has changed. Nutritional researchers mostly get funding from the government sources and industry with potential bias who stick to the script. That is true. Common sense is not so common, says Mindy. You are right, Mindy. Sadly, but true. Had someone recently tell me I need to eat breakfast within an hour of getting up. I asked them what time of day did Jesus breakfast? And I got a look. That's great, Val. Mindy says, I can understand why you're losing your patience being sarcastic and sounding angry when you're being bombarded with all the lies and erroneous information on a constant basis. It's hard not to. Maybe you should back off for a bit to reset your and keep your sanity. Well, Mindy, you know I'm taking 6 months off as a sabbatical starting September the 1st. So I've got to get in on my cray-crayness now. And starting September 1st and through February the 29th next year, we will have plenty of time to not have to look at all this nonsense. But yes, there are some crazy stuff out there. They're trying to scare newbies. Veterans of keto know better, says Bonnie. Exactly. It's a known fact that fasting is healthy for the body to relax your insides. Saying the opposite is such lies. Bonnie, they will lie to your face and not even break character. They don't care. Mandy says, why don't we require a legitimate outline to be proposed for higher quality and cost studies in these expensive metabolic wards rather than dishing out chump change for these crappy false headline studies? It's all wasted money for poor health just to put donut in pockets. Mandy, I agree with you. And I've talked about this before. I wonder if there's a way when they report on these kind of studies that we have here today, that it's bad science, epidemiological science, that they would be required to have to show the public what kind of study it is. That if it's an RCT, it has a certain logo, if it's epidemiological. But again, you still have to teach the public the difference between these different studies. I don't know what the answer is other than don't let them report on epidemiology. But I don't think that's the answer. I want them to report on it, but I want them to make the caveat very, very, very clear that this is hypothesis building data and not really anything for you as a human being to make a change in your life. That's the issue here. The issue isn't that they're sharing the data. The issue is that they're sensationalizing the data that they do get and making it something that it's not and scaring the bejeebies out of people, which again, I think is the intended consequence most of the time. Christine says, newbie here, I fast until dinner every single day. I do drink bulletproof coffee during the fast. Is that okay? Well, that's not fasting, Christine. If you're doing bulletproof during the day, every time you take a sip of that fatty coffee, you're actually getting calories into your system. A true fast is going to be where you're having just water and salt during the fasting period. So if you want to get the benefits of keto, you're certainly doing it the right way, having bulletproof coffee and having a dinner, and that making that the sustenance for your day. If you want to truly fast, I would say hold off on drinking your bulletproof coffee until maybe say noon, and then you have your dinner at 5 or 6. That gives your body that good 18-ish hours of fasting, so you truly get in a good intermittent fast. So, guys, the bottom line in this Jimmy Rants is no matter what you hear from so-called studies out there, skipping breakfast is extremely healthy and it's natural for you to go into spontaneous periods of intermittent fasting when you eat keto. When you cut the carbs down your diet, you're not stoking blood sugar and insulin anymore. When you moderate the protein, you're not stoking blood sugar and insulin anymore. When you're eating healthy, satiating fats, you can go long periods of time without eating it, which includes skipping breakfast in the morning. So don't let this new study discourage you. And a lot of you guys are old-time keto people. Help encourage the newbies, because they're going to post this all over Facebook and all over the internet today. Oh my gosh, does this mean I need to eat breakfast on keto? No, don't change anything if you're getting good results. Just keep on carrying on and you'll be healthy. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. As always, you can engage live in the content, just like everybody here on Instagram did here today. We go live on Instagram Live a couple times a day. LIVINLOWCARBMAN. That's Living Low Carb Man over on Instagram. We also simulcast live here on my Facebook Live page. Thank you guys for being here. Stick around for the Jimmy Rants after party. If you missed the live on Instagram, watch it on replay for up to 24 hours. After 24 hours, go over to YouTube, type in a keyword Jimmy Rants. You will find the show. Finally, the best of the best moments of this here show are in podcast form. It's the Jimmy Rants podcast over on Apple Podcast and Stitcher. All of these links, you guys, are at jimmyrants.com. So until next time, Instagram, we'll see you then.